Warning: the content you are about to see may be considered heresy in some circles. Some may consider it the ravings of a madman, others may consider it the inescapable truth. This is for you to decide. Stay informed and make your own decisions. Paid for by Souls Against Bitcoin and the Kate Committee. What the
It's time. Alright, gamers. If you're new to the Dark Souls series, listen up, okay? We're gonna go into some pretty serious, pretty intense stuff right off the bat that you may or may not have put together. If you have put it together, fantastic. You're on the side of good. If you are a big Gwyn enjoyer, then you know what, hopefully I can bring you over to the good side. There's so much that I learned throughout this game, looking at descriptions and stuff, that completely changed the way I thought about the game after playing all three Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3. And even Demon Souls, that I would play them again completely differently if I went through it, because the entire thing is big Gwyn propaganda, and I think you've been playing the game wrong. I think I played the game wrong, and I will tell you why. Let's get right into it. So, if you are under the age of 18, please grab your booster seat and strap in. If you are of normal age and an adult, it's time to get ready to go. Let's buckle in. If you're over the age of 65, then you probably just didn't wear seatbelts back in your day, so you can really do whatever you want. It's the end of your life. You're doing great. But please do everything responsibly, and let's hop right into the lore, guys. I'm super excited. So the first thing, right, we all know from Dark Souls 1 is that there is this age of ancients. Time ruled by the great dragons, okay? And remember that it is a gray area. That'll come in later. But fire came about, right? And with that came, you know, disparity, conflict, light, dark, life, death, all the shit we don't care about. But what we do know is that 4 lords found 4 souls. We have Nito, we have the Witch of Izalith, we have Gwyn, and we have the Pygmy who got the Dark Soul. And so what happens, the Pygmy is so easily forgotten. Yes, that's air quotes, because this is Big Gwyn at its finest, okay? Let me tell you about this. Gwyn is, as we know, the person who led the other leaders of the souls against the dragons of the Ancient, and defeated them with Seath the Scaleless, who all of a sudden takes the place of the Pygmies, right? It goes through what everybody else does. It goes through Gravelord Nito, it goes through the Witch of Izalith, it goes through Gwyn, and then it just stops. It doesn't talk about the Pygmies. It says, well, there was this dragon who actually turned against its own kind, and ignore the Pygmies. This guy was cool too. It's Big Gwyn, baby. It's Big Gwyn. And if you relink the fire because Big Gwyn tells you, we all did it. I won't lie. I relinked the fire. Look at me, rekindle the flame, baby. Yeah, Age of Fire. Yeah. Boy, oh boy, do I want to go back. After this, there's the Age of Fire. And then the fire starts to go out, right? You know, fire starts to go out. He throws himself into the fire and starts, basically, this unnatural Age of Fire. He extends it. And where Dark Souls 1 takes place is at the end of this second cycle, where even that fire starts to go out. So we have this 2-cycle long period, which could be thousands of years, where Gwyn gets to have his influence over the world. He is the big macho magacho. He's the big leader, and he is deathly afraid, for whatever reason, of the Dark Soul. He just completely wipes them out of existence, at least historically, right? And we find out later in Dark Souls 3 that he is the one, and we learned in all the games, that he is the one that cursed the humans of the Dark Souls, right? We learned that from the Pygmies comes humans, and then after the war, when Gwyn relit the fire, he cursed the people of the Dark Soul because he was afraid. That is a quote from Darkstalker Kaith from the first game, who is a primordial serpent, one of the 2 that you can talk to go about different endings in Dark Souls 1. Another interesting fact, if you read your descriptions, which you should, fellow Dark Soulers, either the Gold Serpent Ring or the Silver Covetous Serpent Ring tell you that the serpent is an incomplete dragon and a sign of the undead, which is very interesting because then these primordial serpents could be, or were supposed to be, your advocates as the undead. They may have been a link between this Age of Ancients and the Age of Dark, right? Which is where we get these primordial serpents, and why out of the 2 of them, Frampt and Kaith, I would argue, want more to look at Kaith, because if we look at Frampt, we know that he tells us that he's a friend of Gwyn. He has been brainwashed by Big Gwyn. He says fire is good. If you relink the fire, you will end the curse. And I have never heard something so Big Gwyn in my life that I can't believe I fell for it the first time. If you go talk to Darkstalker Kaith, the other primordial serpent who sits in the abyss below the 4 kings, well, he'll tell you a very different story. He will tell you that the king, Gwyn, at the dawn of the Age of Man, when darkness was coming, he got scared. And he shackled all of the all of the men, all of the humans, and everything that stemmed from humanity with the dark sign. This is confirmed in Dark Souls 2 and 3, but Dark Souls 2 mostly. The guy Aldia, who is the king of, sorry, not the king, the brother of King Vindrick, who does a bunch of experiments trying to escape the cycle. He tells you that Gwyn banished darkness and cursed all of humanity, everything that stemmed from it. So we get this idea that everybody who has a dark soul is cursed. And Darkstalker Kaith tells you that, well, I'm here to look for a Dark Lord to right these sins because he has obscured your past, hence writing you out of the opening scene in history, and right those wrongs and bring about the Dark Lord who will bring about the Age of Man. So this tells us so much about Big Gwyn and where the world looks like. So before we even start the Dark Souls 1 dialogue, we can set up a whole world before this that makes sense. Okay, so looking through Reddit, looking through different videos, I know that there are different ideas on where the Dark Soul comes from, and who gets it and why. Some people say it's random, some people say it just, once they die, it just kind of might show up, you know what I'm saying? And those theories, they're fine. They fit within the dialogue, definitely, but I don't think they answer more questions than they create, right? And I'm going to opt for a theory that answers most questions. And so this way of thinking, which really got me into the lore, because I think this makes a ton of sense, and it's not new. I don't know, I'm sure someone's thought of it at some point, but do all the people with Dark Souls have this curse? Are there people without the curse? How does that happen? And boy, I think I found one of the best solutions ever made. So if we think of a little thing, so there's Big Gwyn, right, who has this whole propaganda stuff. We'll get to that in a sec. But if we think about it, right, there is the Dark Soul by the Pygmy. All of these four lords have their great soul. And we know from the Four Kings and Seath the Scaleless that these souls can be broken and given down to lesser and lesser people. And we can assume also from the humanity that these were broken down from the Pygmy lords to the Pygmy kings to Pygmies and then down into creating humans, right? And so I think, right, where this whole idea of some people do, some people don't, is it comes from the opening scene where it says, amongst the living there are those with the accursed dark sign. And where are the people that don't have the dark sign? You know, that obviously implies that there are people who don't have it, and this is confirmed by a NPC in Dark Souls 2 called Strayed, who has been petrified through eons and different rises and falls of kingdoms. And he basically says, those who were in power, once the curse set upon them, they pointed out people who they didn't like. Cursed or not, they were sent to this prison, the Lost Bastille. And so we are 100% confirmed that there are people without the curse, and there are people pointing fingers who don't have the curse. And so how does this all fit with the Dark Soul if we know from Aldia and Darkstalker Kaith that everything from humanity is cursed? Here's where we get the definition of the living. This trickle-down soulnomics brought to you by Gwyn, right? Gwyn fractures his soul. Obviously, these trickle down into these people that have the least amount of soul, which would arguably be the Cursed Undead, the Bearer of the Curse, and the Ashen One in the terms of the Dark Soul, and probably in terms of the Witch of Izalith, who we know had the Flame of Life, who tried to create a new First Flame, but ended up creating a Chaos Flame that fueled the demons. But we know that those demons go lesser and lesser and lesser, and they have smaller and smaller forms that become more and more almost human-like, right? They become smaller, right? And so we can kind of get this bottom line of this soul breakage, this soulnomics, right? that create this picture of a very prosperous world, like when the fire's at its best, the Age of Fire, right? We get this idea that there's this world of all these different these people with different souls, and there's definitely higher ups, but there's definitely this lower level, and I think that's what the living are, right? That's how the living looks. And then when the fire fades, okay, we get this plague that starts the Dark Souls, right? All of a sudden these dark signs start showing up, and I think that's just with people who are on that lower tier, or anybody in that line of Dark Souls. All of a sudden they get this curse. But the people that are pointing the fingers and the people that don't have the curse are just this lower tier of people from different souls, right? Whether that be Nito's soul, the skeletons, whether that be the Witch of Isolet, the lower level demons, or the lower levels of Gwyn's light soul, which is probably like just normal people too. Like, I feel like that's what the lower level looks like. Like, we have Gwendolyn, his youngest son, who is clearly a crossbreed, but he's pretty much human. We have the Emerald Herald in Dark Souls 2, who is the lady that helps you. She's not a fire keeper. She's created from dragons by men, but she's definitely human-like, but she doesn't have a dark soul. She dies. And kind of anybody with a light soul just dies. The other evidence of this is Siegmeyer. His whole family, honestly, is like such a big lore dump. Like, it's crazy. So like, we know that Siegmeyer, who's this huge NPC in Dark Souls 1, he comes and he kind of is a big part, and he helps you through the Dark Souls 1 game. But then also his daughter shows up and is looking for him, and you find out it's because his wife died, right? So that means she's not an undead. And we also know that his daughter, from, I guess, text dumps that were not included in the game, were about Siegmeyer telling us that his daughter is actually a normal person, doesn't have the curse. So this whole family is Siegmeyer, who is known to be hollow, he has a dark soul, and his wife, who can die, who doesn't have a dark soul, have a kid that doesn't have a dark soul, who is alive. So we definitely get this crossbreeding. We get crossbreeding with Priscilla in Dark Souls 1, the Painted World, Gwendolyn crossbreeding. Like, these things happen, right? People with different souls have kids, and it seems clearly that someone with a dark soul can have a kid and not that kid not have the dark soul. And when this becomes a problem is at the end of the fire, which I think is super interesting, because we know from Darkstalker Kaith that he feared man. Why would he fear man? Well, it seems to me from the lore that when the fire is going out, that all the undead start to come back. And if we get this idea that all of the Dark Souls, right, if we live in this world where the living are all the lower tier of the four souls, right, or man-made stuff, whatever, that those with the Dark Soul are cursed no matter what, well, why are they suddenly popping up now? That doesn't make too much sense. Well, it kind of does, right? Why would he fear them? Because they're immortal. That's their power, right? We know that he feared them after their fight in the war, enough to count them out of history, enough to change history. We know that from Kaith, that he obscures their history to stop the Dark Lord. Why would he do that? Because they're immortal. That's their actual power. Oh, this is good stuff. The curse allows them death. We know death triggers the curse, for sure. But I think the curse itself is death. How else do you stop an immortal being? You let them die, right? What is the only thing that a god would fear? Is something that he cannot kill. So he's seen them in battle not die. And so he places this curse of fire around them, which traps their dark soul and humanity. And I think at the height of the fire, which we know, we can kind of get this from a couple things, but let me just tell you the theory first, is at the height of fire, there is the curse that is working in full force, and it allows them to die, right? So when the fire is going, when people die, people die. Nobody knows who's a dark soul, who's a light soul, who's a death soul, who's a life soul. Nobody knows, right? I mean, I guess you could probably tell if someone's a demon or not, but whatever. However, once the fire begins to end, right, this is where things get tricky, because now the curse that is linked to the fire, it is literally a seal of fire, and in Dark Souls 3 it is confirmed to be a seal of fire. It is linked to the first flame, and I can only assume that he placed it on people when he rekindled the flame, because then he would have access to the first flame, which in my opinion would give him the most power over beings of the first flame, which would be all four of the souls. At this point, oh, it's a good one, baby. Oh, it's a good one. As the fire fades, the curse starts to fade. So now they get a little bit of their power back, right? They get to come back from the dead. Normally they wouldn't die. They get a little bit power back and they can come back to life. But Gwyn thought of this and put a failsafe in where as the fire fades, sure, they'll be allowed to come back. They'll regain the power of their body, but they'll lose their mind, right? They'll go hollow. The curse will start to absorb humanity to stay alive, and by doing so will cause them to go hollow. So it's like a twofold curse. Like at its full flame, it just keeps everything contained and they die. But as it fades, it will consume the humanity and the soul and make them go hollow to continue this curse, and they'll go hollow, so they lose their minds. They're no threat to them if they're always trying to just consume the nearest soul. They'll never have a thought enough to go after Gwyn, which is his whole point. He doesn't want to lose his rule. He just wants to continued the Age of Fire unnaturally. And a lot of this we just get from Dark Souls 1, but Dark Souls 2 just confirms it with Aldia's dialogue and a lot of the item descriptions. The Dark Sign in Dark Souls 2 doesn't even talk about being reborn. It just talks to you that their curse is to throw themselves into the flame, which adds to this description that the curse isn't being reborn. The curse is always seeking flame, because a Dark Soul wouldn't want to do that. The Dark Soul would want to be in the darkness, right? It wants to bring on the Age of Man, but Big Gwyn has had 2 whole cycles to push out this narrative, this prophecy of the curse is bad, the curse will be cured by relinquishing the flame, which if you go to Frampt, the primordial serpent in Dark Souls 1, he will tell you that. He will tell you that by linking the flame, which is your purpose, you will undo the curse, right? You will cure the curse of the undead. But we know that there's Dark Souls 2, we know there's Dark Souls 3, we know that this cycle continues, we know that it doesn't cure the curse. So he's wrong, or he's also gaslit by Big Gwyn, and we know that... everyone get your tinfoil hats on here. We know that Darkseeker Kaith seems to have the answers, right? He's backed up by Aldia. Basically everything Kaith says, Aldia says later on that Gwyn did this, and that's just the way of the world. And this is all before Dark Souls 1 happens. That's what's so crazy about the lore, is that all the games are at the end of cycles. Everything important that happens in all those games happened earlier. And so we can just talk about all this stuff before the game even starts. But that's the world that I think is created. There's this world of all these lower level beings, they all are fine, they all die, but then as the fire fades, those that are cursed start to come out, and that's where this plague happens. That's why it happens so fast, is that all of a sudden they're all coming back to life, and then they are shipped away. And that's where Dark Souls 1 starts. It starts with them being shipped away. It starts with all of that, ostracization, right? They all get shipped away, and then you are let out of this asylum, and then you do this prophecy, this whole undead world where you are meant to break out of the asylum. There's this chosen undead, you will go light the flame. But in no world would a Dark Soul want to do that. The Dark Soul, the people of they want the darkness. It is the natural state of the world for them to rule in the Age of Man, in the Age of Darkness. There's no reason to want that, and I think that's why this game is so brilliant, is because it takes on our real, prejudices towards wanting the light to win, right? We want light to continue, right? There's always been a light and a dark side, and we've always been on the side of light and stopping the darkness, and we want to relight the flame, and we get all that. And then from the start of the game, that's what you're told: go ring the 2 bells of awakening, go collect the 4 Lord Souls, rekindle the flame, end the curse, right? It's just it's all Big Gwyn. It's all big propaganda, because you aren't playing on the side of light in this game. It is called Dark Souls, and when I first played this game way back when it came out, obviously there was a 10-year gap between me playing these games, because I just played them for the challenge and didn't worry about it, and then this time around I played them kind of the same, but then this time I got into the lore, and I would completely play them differently again, because you're playing as the Dark Soul. You are a being of darkness. Why would you want the light to come back? You don't. But every game is so linked towards every game, every movie, every TV show, everything is so towards the light, and they knew that. And so they put you in a world that pushes you towards that. All the same agendas. Relink the fire, darkness bad, you're undead, stop it, oh my god, save the undead. But the only way to save the undead is to go to darkness, right? It's not a bad thing, and they tell you that it's a natural cycle of the world, that Gwyn actually is the bad guy. He extended the light of fire unnaturally, and now everything's going to shit because he did this. Because there was this whole world set up, and he ruined it. He cursed everybody, but that would only be a problem when the fire started to fade, so he had to fix it, and so he relit the fire. It's Big Gwyn, and it's so Gwyn. You know what I'm saying? It's just so Gwyn to do this stuff. But I definitely think that hopefully I've explained everything decently. There is a ton. I went through a bunch of descriptions. I even went through all the Wikipedia descriptions. No, I tried to stay away from their descriptions. I literally just looked up the descriptions. I avoided their lore pieces or any of their other pieces where they actually type it out. I really just looked for the descriptions to make this happen. There's a ton of stuff on Reddit and videos that probably influenced me. I didn't plan to make this video, but I just got so into it that I was like, no, some of these ideas are okay, but I feel like some of these ideas are wrong.
Please be advised, the informant rambles on for quite some time after this. His circuitous ideas are lost to the abyss. While we expect this information to be enlightening, be careful with whom you share this newfound insight. Big Gwyn is always watching. Stay informed and make your own decisions.
Paid for by souls. Oh, it faded away. Okay.